Hello and welcome to episode 72 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is a man who tried to break into the world of personal digital assistants, only to find that nobody wanted a packlet version, Greendragoon.
Oh, what, a packlet version?
Yeah, it wasn't popular.
That seems like an intensely popular thing to me.
And we also have a man who is currently polling at 1% in the Federation president race, Markhawkman.
Well, you know.
Got to get out there and work the vote,
man. People this year.
And our guests tonight, you know them from the Foundry Talk chat channel and the Synergy playthroughs. Please welcome AdmiralGhost and SoftGunForever.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. So, as everyone might expect, there is lots of news this week, and it's all Delta Rising all the time. there honestly isn't any Foundry news, but there's plenty of regular game news. Especially because last night being Tuesday night, the first real content from Delta Rising began to appear on Tribble. Right now you can play a story mission and a PvE queue event. I went and played both of them last night, and I won't give anything away about the storyline, especially of the mission Mindscape. But I will say that it does take place mostly in the new Intrepid interior, which looks fantastic, and is, of course, full of objects that we would love to have in the Foundry. I believe Sir Boulevard was going to make a list and give it to Taco, and then, of course, we got into a Twitter conversation with Taco. Apparently, his next idea after getting in some of the new Romulus assets is space stations.
That's definitely something I've heard asked for a few times.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great space stations in game that we don't have in the Foundry, so be in fantastic resource to have.
So I was thinking about something, and I didn't bring it up because that conversation grew massive.
Yes.
But if the Voyager interior appears in a mission, would that be an ideal candidate as a map to put into the Foundry versus asking for the ship interior, which apparently is a mess?
It's possible. It depends on how it was built. I mean, unless he's using that one that is used for the player ship interior.
Don't think they would.
If it's not a separate map. I would think it'd be a separate map, but hard to say.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that Twitter conversation?
Yeah.
Since we brought it up.
Started out with talking about a specific asset, and then mushroomed into a lot of assets. And then it mushroomed into a conversation about the difference in tagging space and ground objects. And then Tumor Boy actually gave us a sneak peek and showed us one of the text files that are used to tag Foundry assets. It's big, long thing that mostly looks. I don't know if anyone's ever worked in something like XML or one of those bracket separated text formats. It kind of looks a lot like that. And it's basically where things like the description and the tagging for which categories things appear in, and the official name and stuff like that are all kept. Keep in mind, this is not the asset itself. That's actually referenced as a separate piece.
But it's interesting because it contained different tags for ground, or no, it was exterior. It was type exterior was what we were looking at, and there's type interior, there's type building, which puts it in the building tab, and type space. So. And
apparently, there's also a planet one.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
so that's the little tag that tells it where to go in each of those tabs in the Foundry editor.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And
the question what brought it up was Cerberus Films was talking to him about lowering the barriers between objects being in only space and only ground, so that you could use space assets on the ground and vice versa.
I assume that you would have to go through and like tag every single. Or add
Yeah,
the
it looks
tag.
like you would have to do it individually.
Yeah.
There are
Which is-
a few specific objects that are usable in both space and ground maps.
Well, I mean, in this case, it just means that they both have both the type space and type ground tag.
Yeah, I didn't see any on there that had 2 tags put on them, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, it didn't seem in any particular order. I think it was just something that the engine searches for a specific tag and then filters anything that doesn't have it.
It seems like might be one of the barriers to getting lots of assets in the Foundry lots of times, because it seems like it'd be a very tedious process.
Yeah, everyone has to be manually updated. We're talking like copy pasting in bits of text into specific entries in a text file, not just clicking a checkbox.
Yeah. You can blame the guys who first set up the thing. So, because of course Taco is not one of those guys.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean-
the first rule of computer programming is everything is always more complicated than it needs to be.
That's because it requires more programming in order to make it less complicated.
I can see how that would be true.
So, I mean, if you're a programmer, who are you to make more work for, yourself or the artist?
And Service Films suggested that he make a program to sort through these things a bit faster, I think, and Taco said, I am not a programmer, which is, of course, true.
Yeah,
he is an artist.
I know what Serb was thinking, and yeah, it could work, but you still have to get someone to write the program.
Mm-hmm. Which, if you are a programmer, they're hiring. Lots of
Sure.
openings. So,
It always seems like they've got something
Mhm.
open.
so if you're interested in the Foundry and you're a programmer, send in an application. Apparently, they're hiring at their main studio in California and up in Seattle, which I think is the one that's working on Champions Online. So,
I don't know. I mean, they've been doing a lot of hiring up there, so I'm not sure.
or
if
this
Champions
super
or-
secret project that Dan Stahl is on. We still haven't figured out what that is.
That, of course, assumes that they only have one super secret project.
That's true. We do not know. Let's see. Moving on. Let's see. That was the mission, Mindscape, and I won't tell you too much about that. But the new PvE mission is called Disconnected. They put up a dev blog about that. Involves you fighting off Borg ships while trying to reprogram Borg cooperative ships to rescue the liberated Borg drones that are on board. I think it's kind of a fun mission because you kind of have to balance killing the mobs with saving the other mobs. And of course, sometimes you have to kill them to get them off your back in order to do interact to save the other guys. I don't know. Have any of you guys played it yet?
Not me.
No, I haven't.
I
not
looked
yet.
at the pictures.
Okay, so I'm the only one.
All I did was look at the pictures.
Well, one thing I will say is that it does reward Delta marks, which is a new kind of mark. Assuming this is probably for a reputation track, but none of that is hooked up just yet. Right now on Tribble, you can also get to the Delta Quadrant itself through the Genolan Sphere. So far, it consists of 2 large sector blocks that are populated with lots of star systems that don't do anything yet. I kind of look at these all as potential Foundry doors, let's hope. I did notice a couple interesting things like the Zal system. The Zal were a species that were erased by Anorax and his Krenim time ship. Since the time ship, I guess, was erased itself, the Zal seemed to be back.
Right, but I wouldn't count them being able to go to their planet and talk to them. I mean, we have Vendor, and we don't get to talk to the Vendorians.
No, we don't know yet. I also saw interesting things that looked like the Hirogen communication sensor array network.
Didn't we fry that? Or
Yeah.
did Voyager fry that network?
I think so.
Well, it didn't completely destroy it. It knocked it offline. Apparently, the Hirogen turned it back on.
They could also be caretaker arrays. I do not know. They look like one or the other. It's hard to say at this point, but I'm sure that they will be adding more and more to that as we go on in testing. One thing I will do right now is advise everyone to complete the mission Surface Tension on all of your characters if you haven't done that already, because you have to have done that to progress in the story. So let's see, in addition to what's been going on in Tribble, we've also had several more information releases. One of the big ones being that in addition to Garrett Wong and Tim Russ, we will also be having Jerry Ryan, Ethan Phillips, and Robert Picardo lending their voice talents to Star Trek Online.
Yeah, it's quite a selection. I mean, I think the biggest surprise was probably Jerry Ryan, because she's actually, a pretty heavily involved actor.
Yeah, very successful.
Because she's in a TV show right now, isn't she?
Picardo as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Jerry Ryan is currently on something as a regular.
Well, Jerry Ryan has found time recently to go on a podcast TV show run by Will Wheaton. So, who knows?
Well, personally, I'm with this and with the awesome Intrepid interior, I'm having all sorts of flashbacks to Elite Force. It's my favorite Star Trek game of all time, which, of course, had the whole voice cast of Voyager way back in 2000. So it's great. It's like a little gaming reunion here.
I wonder if they're going to take advantage of Jerry Ryan and use her to go back and read Omega missions.
Could be.
So she seems like a great spokesperson for killing the Borg.
Well, we know in the lore
getting
that Seven of
work
Nine
better.
left the Federation, left Starfleet, really, because didn't agree with their stance on the Borg back when they didn't view them as a threat. But since obviously we do now after the whole Vega thing and all the SDFs and all that storyline, I don't know. Obviously, I think she could come back into the fold.
Seven definitely feels like the sort of character who would want to get to know her shall we say disconnected cousins a bit better, rather than simply shooting them for being Borg.
I don't know. She was pretty don't underestimate the threat in Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, but that's from the forces currently controlled by the Queen, not necessarily the others.
Oh,
I think you're talking about the liberated Borg, like the cooperative and us,
Yes.
all our liberated Borg characters as well.
No, but I was just referring to like the STFs and the possibly the Borg missions. I realize.
Well, in this new PvEQ event, she is the one that's going to be telling you what to do. Her voiceover isn't in game yet, but she's the mission giver. And that's not too much of a spoiler. Let's see.
Just a little.
The other big news, of course, that has set the forums on fire, which really what doesn't, is the Operations Pack, which is now available. This is similar to the Legacy Romulus Pack from the last expansion. Contains 8 ships, bridge officers, duty officers, titles, and tokens for T5 ship upgrades.
Well, so far.
Yeah, so far.
If you remember, the Legacy Pack got expanded before it was actually released.
It did a little bit, yeah.
And even the QA has mention of...
Talaxian costume. Sorry, forgot that one.
I was going to say, yeah,
Because I
even
don't care about it.
the Q&A states that if future ships are revealed, they'll be added in.
That's nice because, full disclosure, I actually already bought one. I knew I was always going to do that. So, it was always in my budget and it was always in my plan. So, went up, I bought it. But regardless of what you think about this or not, it gives us just a ton of information. First off being that the release date for the expansion pack will be October 14th. This corresponds with the end of the XP event. And, of course, as we all know, it will be the beginning of Foundry downtime. This is just inevitable.
And I'm sure we'll run through our Foundry downtime preparation checklist
As
before we
always.
get there.
The first being, don't panic. And we'll get to the rest later. It is entirely normal. So, but the other information that we got is obviously a lot more stuff and screenshots about the new T6 ships. A lot of them are classified as intelligence ships, meaning, I think, and we haven't necessarily gotten their backstory just yet, but what I think it means is that they belong to or are constructed by organizations like Starfleet Intelligence, rather than, the main fleets. So far, the Feds get 3 of these, a cruiser, an escort, and a science ship. The KDF and the Romulans get 1 each. And each faction with this pack is also getting a more traditional ship that is T6. For the Feds, it's the Guardian Cruiser, which to me looks like a galaxy crossed with a giraffe. The KDF get a Raptor, and the Romulans get a Warbird that sort of looks like the White Star from Babylon 5. But we just got concept on a lot of those just yet.
Well,
Yeah, but-
it also looks like the Romulan DSD a bit too. So
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta love
there's
that
all sorts of
Iradex, though.
there's all sorts of speculation about what these things look like and what influences, and really, we can't really say unless we're the artist what it's influenced by. So it could be just coincidence that it looks like these things to us.
Oh, no,
I don't know.
I do like some of the Klingon and Romulan ships. I'm okay with the intelligence ships. I did hear from Jam Jams that there will be an option to put Bussard collectors on the nacelles, which will be really nice.
Now, for a nice nerd moment, can you tell us what do those do?
They collect stray deuterium in space, and then as a augmented source of fuel.
well, not just deuterium, but among other things, yes.
Yeah.
It's what is it? Riker used to take in the gas and
Yeah.
shove it down the Sonos throats, as he said in
Yeah,
Insurrection.
it's basically an interstellar gas collector.
Yep. But the ship designs are generating a fair amount of controversy because some of them are very large departures from what we've seen before, especially the Federation ones.
Well, one of the Fed ships actually, it's not that big a departure, or it wouldn't be if you retextured the hull, because the overall shape is a lot like the Prometheus, but with a smooth finish on the hull rather than whatever they normally have on Fed ships.
If I may say
You can
something,
change it out.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, chime in anytime.
the escort for the Federation side looks a lot like a reskinned Defiant class, in my opinion, if you take
yeah.
a look at that one.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's going to be bigger than your average Defiant, though, like several times as big.
Oh, great.
Cryptic Quack has been in the forums talking to people about the ship designs today, and he confirmed that it was going to be a bit larger.
So
Well, the Defiant's a bit of an anomaly anyways, because it's small enough to fit in the hangar bay of the Derrideck. It's a teeny little speck on the windshield.
So something I will point out to a lot of people is I think a lot of people are worried about the Intel ships as a herald of future designs, and this is not the case. I'm reasonably confident at this point that the Intel ships are actually an exception, not a rule, similar to what the Dyson ships were.
They're sort of lore based, they have a reason behind what they look like, and then they're going to go back to the usual line of regular Federation looking ships.
Would
yeah.
this reasoning be something along the lines of, say, Section 31?
I don't think they're actually Section 31. I think they're regular Starfleet intelligence.
Yeah,
That's my
because
guess.
they're called intelligent ships for a reason, right?
That's what Section 31
And
wants you to think.
It's only a guess at this point.
Right.
I think they're more like reconnaissance ships. All the new Federation ones except for that giraffe ship has a cloak, which kind of gives me the impression they are meant specifically for reconnaissance. It's also stated the cruiser is smaller than your average cruiser, so I definitely get the impression they were not meant specifically for combat, more for surveillance.
But this being Stowe, they have to be very combat capable.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely seem strong in the debuff category.
And stealthy.
Yeah, they pretty much all come with cloaking devices, don't they?
Yeah, and then looking at the bridge officers, which you can see their powers now on Tribble, the new intelligence bridge officers, which that has been unredacted, so we can say that now. Actually, this being an independent podcast, we can say what we like. But the intelligence bridge officers, some of them have like short-term, couple of second cloaks in their powers, which is quite interesting. Like intelligence team carries with it a cloak for some a short period of time. So they're very stealth oriented, which of course is definitely a departure for the Federation, because up until this time we've had very few cloaks. Something that the balance people on the forums have been after them to do for a long, long time.
Of course,
honestly, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about the Federation signing that one treaty saying that they couldn't even produce cloaking devices. Maybe that's the reason why we don't have very many on Federation ships. But that's just me thinking.
Yeah,
it was. Now the question is, with the state of the Romulan Empire, because that's who we signed the treaty with the state that they're in, is it still valid?
Yeah, you could argue that the political entity that the United Federation of Planets signed that treaty with no longer exists, thus making the treaty null and void.
Or at the very least, they're no longer in a position to enforce it.
Mm-hmm. Or we've essentially chosen to recognize the Romulan Republic and not recognize the remains of the Romulan Empire, which makes that treaty null and void.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's much of an empire left either. It's more like there's Sela and there's splinter groups, but there's no empire.
So there's not even a Sela anymore.
We don't know where Sela went.
That is true.
So yeah, what's left? A few squabbling senators at best.
Mm-hmm.
A fragment of a military. No, I was going to ask the question though. Makes things really interesting because why is the sudden interest by the Federation in building intelligence ships? It definitely seems like
this is not something that we've seen before.
My hypothesis is that it relates to species 8472.
Maybe that's not a species that you would really spy on.
Maybe they're more counterintelligence. Obviously, they've done a lot of infiltrating, and well, that's not good for us. So we want to build things to counter that.
Yeah, but even then, you wouldn't use ships for that.
Well, who knows? Because I think we're going to get some backstory for these ships pretty soon.
I think the main reason why they are so stealth-focused is the whole idea of going into the Delta Quadrant and exploring. Because if Voyager taught us one thing, it is that there is a lot of species in the Delta Quadrant who don't really like us very much. So I can kind of imagine if you want to effectively explore a quadrant that may be almost completely hostile to you, best way to do that would be to keep a low profile. And what's better for keeping a low profile than a lot of stealth?
Yeah, especially if you run into the case on Nistrum, because if I remember right, the case on Nistrum actually did have some sort of stealth technology. Not exactly cloaking, but something similar.
I think it opens up a good, and I was saying this on Twitter earlier, that it opens up some interesting Foundry ideas. This idea of sort of militarizing your intelligence apparatus, because that can come with some problems, especially with covert ops having less oversight than your regular fleets. As I don't know, I'm sure. Maybe not everybody, but I'm sure a lot of people saw Captain America Winter Soldier, which had that kind of plot line. So I don't know. I think it could come up with some good Foundry missions related to this. In fact, I'm going to adapt a couple of my existing Foundry missions and put some of these ships in as soon as we get them in the Foundry. Hopefully that will be soon.
I know. I mean, I would almost like to see Cryptic kind of explore that, because I mean, can you imagine a mission where you that puts you on the opposite side of Franklin Drake?
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Well, one thing that you brought up is that would be very interesting is that we've seen hints that they're probably going to have several of the alien ships playable in some fashion. You know, lock boxes usually contain such things, after all. So, you know, obviously those would be nice to have in the Foundry as customizable assets.
And I mean, I've said it many times, but if there's one thing that we consistently get updates on, it's ships. So I would expect to see the ships in the Foundry before too long. Alien and otherwise.
Yeah, and hopefully some NPC groups as well.
Would be nice. That's another thing we get updated on very consistently. All right, let's move it along to what we've been working on. So to our two guests, what are some things that you guys have been working on lately? I don't think you're Foundry authors yourselves, but you do work on lots of cool stuff.
Yeah.
You want to go first or me?
I'll take it first if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
What we work on is a YouTube show about Foundry missions. The main thing about it is we record ourselves playing the missions, and well, then we obviously put it on YouTube. So that's a regular thing.
I'm actually about to put a link into your Twitch thingy-mababa right now to our channel itself. It's called Synergy Foundry Playthroughs. There you go. There's a link. He usually goes through the missions to see if they're any good or something like that. I don't know. And me, I go through them completely blind. I have created one Foundry mission, and it's called Eye of the Beholder. It's got a lot of movie references in it, and not too many people like it. But other than that, that's pretty much all we do.
And I say you guys just, you said you just finished one, playing a new mission, right?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We finished a trilogy on the Klingon side. Honor of Farasa, Honor of Orions, and Honor of the Empire. Nice little trilogy made by Sir
Our
Boulevard.
very good friend, Sir Boulevard, yeah.
Who is also in the chat room right now.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome.
Probably does not mind the shout out. We're all about shameless self-promotion here.
Right. It was a great series, and it had a lot of felines like I like in it. And best of all, nobody important died, so they didn't have to hear me rage like they heard on, say, one of Zera's missions where they assimilated Kate. That really made me angry.
So, harm Caitians at your own risk.
Yeah.
So, how do you guys go about choosing the missions?
That would be on my end. Normally, well, in the beginning, I just chose random missions that looked interesting based on titles. But we also do take suggestions from people. And sometimes I just browse through the top 50 list, and sometimes I look through the review content. And I also have bookmarked a page which I believe it was actually Drogan who created a very long time ago. I think it was named 17 Foundry Story Authors. And sometimes I just look up those names to see if they got anything interesting.
I believe that was Kirkfat, actually.
Oh, that might have been it.
It was a little project of his. I think he was looking through the top 50 list and to see all the story mission authors who were there who didn't have spotlights or something like that. I can't remember how he did that exactly, but yeah. I remember you guys played one of my missions, Cold Winds, and it was absolutely hilarious.
We had a lot of fun that one.
Yeah. Especially your reaction when you figured out it was based on The Voyage Home. Or no, not The Voyage Home. I'm spacing the name of the movie. Star Trek V.
Oh no!
So yeah, I mean, anybody out there who hasn't listened to these guys, they are just a hoot to listen to. You got to watch it. It's great.
Blame Ghost for that.
Well, it's because I'm constantly random. I keep doing random comments. I finally figured out a way to put in music into our stuff, though it's not very high quality. I mean, it is from my phone after all.
It's better than what I can do.
True enough.
All right. Let's see. Greendragoon, what have you been working on?
I've been putting some stuff on part 2. I got my costumes finished last week, and so I've actually kind of started tweaking some audio. Mostly on this one map that has a lot of exposition, but kind of adding in some extra dialogue and stuff to kind of fill in some things that I kind of skim past, because there's like one portion where I introduce a couple of characters and then they never talk ever again, at least for the portion they're around, and so I started kind of adding in some stuff to have them interject in the conversation. I got a section of exposition I need to rewrite because I need to skim it down and split it up, and I've just been avoiding it like the plague just because I know it's going to take me a while to rewrite it, and it's just one of those tricky things. But I mean, if I can get through that, I mean, and just finish fixing all the spelling mistakes. I'm really hoping to have this one done really soon. Just finding time to work on it.
That can always be difficult, I'm afraid, finding time.
Yeah, unfortunately, life has been a little crazy right now. And on top of it, there's this crystalline entity event. And then somebody talked me into trying to do it on all of my max level characters. And so now it takes me like an hour and a half to get through all of them.
Why would somebody do that to you? That's I
don't know. Terrible. He must be crazy, and I'm probably nuts for listening to him.
Some crazy guy who's doing it on like 18 tunes, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I already did it on all 12 of mine. That wasn't so hard. Imani's actually going to attempt to do it a second time because I realized that I'd slotted the project for the first event back in the second event when you could still slot the previous event. But, of course, I don't have the shards to fill in the second one yet.
Well, I'm just doing it once on all my characters, so...
Well, it's only Imani that has it, the second one, so...
All right. Well, Mark, between all that crystal and entity running, have you been in the Foundry much?
Well, in my case, it's both the crystalline entity and the anniversary event and champions that have been distracting me. But I did actually manage to find some time to do Foundry stuff over the last week or so. I continue to tinker with the story structuring in Fractal Nebula to try to make it something that's at least, semi-coherent, because, well, this mission is designed to not play the same way twice unless the player does things to intentionally make it come out the same way twice.
That sounds complicated.
Well, one of the things that I had to figure out for it was I have a ground map where a random type of characters will spawn. They might be friendly or they might be hostile, and different types of characters will spawn. And I actually managed to come up with an idea for creating a pseudo. It's technically not a dialogue with contact, but it plays out the same way because what the idea here is that to have you communicating with one of the FGC-47 life forms by walking up to this little glowing energy orb and trying to talk to it. Yeah, it's just one of those things that seemed amusing to me to try to work into a mission. But obviously those are only one of several possible scenarios for the way the mission plays out.
Well, whenever you're done, let me know. I'd like to take a look at that.
No problem.
Well, I was actually in the Foundry this week, doing a few little things here and there. I had Sir Boulevard was asking in the chat channel for some missions to play, so I linked him one of mine, which is Land of Hope and Glory, which is the one I'm working on a sequel to it right now. And he came back with a suggestion for one of my interior maps, which is to use, and I want to try and remember the name of this backdrop. It's Interior Sky Science 01 or something like that, which actually has a bit brighter lighting, but also has a star field that you can see out the window, which makes it great for interior maps. When you do, when you're building in the black space between the interiors. So we got that, so you can see the stars out the window, but it's not so dark anymore, which meant I could take out the little dialogue I had with one of the guys saying, "Sorry, it's so dark on this map, Captain. The lighting's broken. I'm trying to fix it." So I could get rid of that. And then while I was in there, I decided to, because it's a Federation interior, a custom-built interior, Sky Castle as we like to call them, I decided to get rid of the old building block floors and put in the nice carpets and nice thing for the ceiling. So I got that done, published the new version. A couple of the other things I was doing was a few little experiments with some Delta Quadrant stuff. I decided to experiment to see if I could make a good-looking empty space. You might remember the episode Night, where Voyager was crossing this vast expanse of nothing. There were no planets, no stars, no nothing, and no light was the other part of it. And obviously, if you just have no backdrop in your map, your ships show up nice and bright. So there's an effect in there in the backdrops, one of them that you can put on, that actually does make it darker and makes it look like the only light source is your running lights. And I'll try and, for the show notes, get the exact name of that, but I think it's just a darker effect is what it's called. And there's 3 different levels of it, and I chose the darkest one, and it looked very good. So, I mean, we know we're going to encounter the Malon, so that could be a good thing, a good setting for a Foundry mission.
I know we were talking on Twitter, especially like episodes like The Void, and actually there were 2 voids. As there
were 2 voids because they called that empty space the Void, and then there was an episode called The Void, which was about something completely different.
Yeah, it was like a subspace pocket that they got sucked into, which actually had a lot of stuff in it that got sucked in on previous occasions.
Other ships as well.
Of course, the trick with this particular void was getting out of it.
Yeah.
That episode actually reminds me of Elite Force Swan, where they had the similar situation.
Very similar. And those 2, they came out within months of each other as well. Elite Force and that episode.
That episode also reminded me of one of the animated series episodes called Time Trap, where Kirk gets into a fight with this Klingon ship while investigating the disappearance of a Federation vessel, and oops, the Enterprise and the Klingon ship both find themselves in this subspace domain, which is where the missing ship went to.
I think you could make a great Foundry mission following up on either that episode or Elite Force. I mean, Elite Force would be a little bit difficult because you'd have to get around the EULA and make sure you didn't include any copyrighted material from that game, but using concepts or things from that game, you could reference it as perhaps an event that had happened vaguely. I don't know, it'd be a challenge, but I think it'd be fun because, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it is my favorite Star Trek game of all time, present company accepted, of course. I did is I went and rewatched the episode Nemesis, which I mentioned in the last show, which is the one where Chakotay crash lands and this alien race kind of tries to co-opt him into their war against these scary-looking aliens. And it turns out the scary-looking aliens are the good guys, and Voyager allies with them to get Chakotay out of there. The scary-looking aliens look almost exactly like Nausicaans, so that's an easy one. I created some skins that look pretty good for them. And then the other guys look human, with sort of military-looking camouflaged green garb on. So they're pretty easy to make, too. So I created a few costumes for them. I don't know what kind of storyline you would do. There's a lot of possibilities there, I think. All right, why don't we go to mission reviews? Mark, why don't you start us off?
Okay. Recently I played this mission named... Well, okay, first off, it's a KDF mission. So, yeah, Klingon faction, and its name is Planet Penny. Apparently the author was intending to make a series of missions, not just one, but so far the author's only made one mission. And apparently I'm the only person to ever play it. But anyways, the author's name is Betayuya. Someone saw on the forums who was talking about having issues with getting the mission published properly, so I, checked to see if it had been published and then played it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the mission is kind of like an homage to the Inspector Gadget cartoon, and I think that's actually where the name Penny came from. And certain aspects of the mission make more sense when you look at it in that regard. Like, one of the mission objectives is actually to go to a random console on Kronos, which is one of the standard things that they did in all the Inspector Gadget cartoons. Is Gadget would go to this potted plant in a post office to get his mission orders, instead of something that would make sense for a real police officer to do. But the basic gist of it is that there is this individual named Penny who is a member of an unknown species with equally unknown abilities, who is working on a research center, and the Klingon Council has not heard from her recently, and they send you to investigate. At which point you find out that the research base is under attack, and that the attackers actually haven't managed to take over the base yet. So, your mission ends up being to fight off the attackers and save Penny. Which, the basic premise of it's actually pretty simple, and it's actually not a very complex mission, and it's obviously this author's first work, so it's somewhat rough, but it was a pretty enjoyable mission, actually, though. It had a lot of things where, you kill 20 guys or something other, but it actually had an interesting storyline reason for why you're doing the whole kill 20 guys thing. So I thought it was definitely a worth playing mission.
Now, you mentioned that this one is still under 5 reviews, so it needs some help getting out of there.
I just checked before we started the show, and as of approximately an hour ago, I'm still the only person who's ever played it.
Hey, may I cut in? Hey, SoftGun, you want to try that one next?
We can do that, I guess. We'll see.
All right.
Though, as I did tell you the other day, I would like to get away from the KDF theme a bit again.
True enough. All right.
This is very atypical for a KDF mission. Let's just put it there.
All right. Well, let's see. I've got a mission that could be up your guys' alley. I think it would need some work first, though. It's called the Caitian Gambit Part 1. This is by HelixFungus. And obviously, it has to do with Caitians. Now, one thing that this author does let you know is that English is not his native language, and it does show. But given that knowledge, I would be personally much more lenient. I'm much more lenient with it. So, just sort of focusing less on the problems with the dialogue and more on, the story itself and the technical aspects of the mission. So it starts, as many Star Trek stories do, with a distress signal. You start dealing with this sort of very eccentric Caitian admiral. And let's see, I'm trying to remember what the plot was. The first part of the plot is you go to help this admiral because he's under attack by a rogue shapeshifter. The shapeshifter he has some Dominion backing, but it's more like it's rogue, and they have they're criminals, they're criminal activities, and he in the past tried to thwart them and actually took a trophy. This is sort of an interesting thing. He took a trophy. He took part of the shapeshifter as a trophy, and it goes into great length about how this was done and how he says, in his estimation of the Caitian culture, that this is something that they normally do. Obviously, I don't know if there's really a lot written about Caitian culture, so I don't know if this is something that he made up himself or brought in from somewhere else.
From what I've seen, not really. I think they're mostly portrayed as a very peaceful race.
There's not very much on the Caitian culture that I can find, even just by searching Google or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
I don't know how much has
Here's
been
the thing
written
with
about
Caitian.
them.
Well, I'd heard that they were actually to the point of... Go ahead, Mark.
Well, canon information on Caitians comes from only two sources: Star Trek the Animated Series and the Star Trek movies, none of which went into any detail on Caitian culture. They just showed Caitians walking around.
So it's free for interpretation, I would say.
Yep.
So you help him with this, and then you go aboard his ship for a little bit of a party on the way to the homeworld. It seems strange to have a party at that time when he had just been attacked. You had just helped him save the ship from the Dominion. However, your captain actually does remark on this that it's very strange, so that's good. Sometimes when there's strange things going on, it's best to have your captain say, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is weird. Because it shows that your captain is no fool. And I always like seeing that. So here's where it kind of goes off the rails. It transitions from this plot, which deals with the Admiral and this rogue shapeshifter who has it out for the Admiral. And it changes into pretty much a rehash of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Keeping very much with the plot of that film and having, an entity with a cloud around it bearing down on the Caitian homeworld. And you have to go inside and figure out what it is and what it wants, and it pretty much follows the plot of the movie. It really comes out of nowhere and seems to have almost no purpose to the original plot.
I say, does it have anything to do with the Changeling or the...
It really doesn't. It really doesn't at all. And once you resolve that part, it goes back to the plot with the Dominion, and they come out of nowhere and resume their attacks. Now,
Does it explain where that cloud came from? Because an explanation of the cloud's origin might possibly tie the aspects
it does.
together.
It does, and it's pretty much the same as it is from in the motion picture, where it was the Caitians back when they were pre-warp civilization sent out a probe, and the probe met a machine and became super intelligent and is now coming back to find the creator.
Okay, that's just weird.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it was really hard to fathom exactly why he did this, because I thought the original plot was actually more interesting. Having a rogue shapeshifter out there can be very dangerous, obviously, and I liked that part.
It would actually be quite entertaining if the explanation for the machine thing's return was actually something that one of the Vortex came up with, because they're like, hey, where did this come from? Oh wait, I know how to find out. But
yeah, like I say, there would be, going off what you said here, is there would be sort of two courses of action that he could take. One would be to get rid of that extraneous piece of plot and go back to and expand the original. Obviously, he's got more to tell in this story because it's only part 1 of 2. I don't think his part 2 is out yet. The other would be to make that part of the plot more integral and more connected to the original plot. I've seen this happen before with authors. They have, several ideas and they want to put them in the same mission, when sometimes they just don't need to be in the same mission because they have nothing to do with each other. I've even seen this happen in cryptic missions. You remember the conference on the Borg that started off the 2800 series, which had nothing to do with the rest of the series and was almost never mentioned again, even.
Yeah.
That was used as an excuse to get you there and to have everybody there, but so I see why they did it. I just, it just had nothing to do with anything. So, that's the advice I would have for this author, is that those are kind of two roads you could go down. Technically, the mission was very good. Actually, I really liked the parts that were inside the entity's cloud. That was really very cool. And when you beam down to the entity itself and walk around and speak with it, not unlike the motion picture, obviously, that was a really very cool looking map. Had big, vaulted ceilings and lots of great use of objects. So, and everything worked. There wasn't any trigger work that was bad. There wasn't any objectives that didn't take you anywhere. Crazy things like that. The combat was just fine. It wasn't too hard. It wasn't too long, like last week's. Were a bit too long for me. So I think, on the whole, it's actually not a bad mission. It just has this weird change of direction that I think could be done a lot better. So the last piece of advice I would have for the author is, and this is for anybody, if you are making a mission that's not necessarily in your native language and you don't necessarily have the best command of that other language, find somebody who'd be willing to help you touch up your dialogue and get it to a point where it makes sense in that other language. And I'm sure there'd absolutely be plenty of people willing to help anybody do that. Because it's just as simple as, making sure that you have the correct punctuation. It's not necessarily changing your words. It's just making sure that the words are the correct ones that need to be in there and they make sense in the correct sentence structure.
I've actually done that once myself, and the things that I noted most often were places where the writer accidentally put in a German word instead of an English word. There are some German words that are spelled just slightly different from their English counterpart, and that's the sort of thing that popped in most often. Another is that German doesn't exactly have the same grammar as English, and occasionally the person who did this other mission would write out a sentence using English words and German grammar.
Yeah, and that's a common thing among languages, is that the sentence structure itself is different. Words are placed in different places, and I don't know, I'm sure it's tough, because I know if I took a little bit of French in college, and if I tried to make a mission in French, it would be absolutely atrocious. Ashkirk in the chat room is saying that he promised him he would help him touch it up when he reviewed it. That's very nice of you, Ash. Thank you very much. I think it's just a simple procedure and something that will help immensely. But after that, and if he takes a good hard look at that extraneous plot element, I think it could be a solid mission.
Yeah, honestly, it almost sounds like you should duplicate the mission and then split it into 2 missions.
Yeah. Put that other part by itself and focus on that Caitian admiral and his plotline much better.
Yeah, but I mean, if he does that, he can build the boat out separately without having to junk any work.
Mm-hmm. And so if you're unfamiliar with that process, anybody listening in, basically what you do is there's, and I'm going to forget the names of the buttons. Is it import project button?
I think it's archive.
Archived project button. Down in when you're looking at the list of all your missions, the archive project button should be down at the bottom, and that allows you to make a new copy of that mission. It won't have any of the previous reviews still on it, but it should have all of your maps, all of your objectives, all of your costumes, all of that. So you can import it, get rid of what you don't want, and keep what you want. All right, let's see. Let's move it on to discussion topics. So, what would you all like to talk about today?
Good question.
Well, I was thinking about doing a topic about custom interiors, but you guys mentioned that would be a bit more complicated than doing it, just talking about it. So, I guess we could talk about lampshading.
Say that again.
We could talk about lampshading.
Lampshading. That's a good one, because that was something that HelixFungus did in his mission. Why don't you give us a definition of what lampshading is?
Well, it's when you call out the fact that you're using a plot element that seems absurd, and basically, have it so that the characters in the story point out that it seems absurd to them in some way, instead of just pretending that it's perfectly normal and just an ordinary, everyday part of life.
Which, using the example from that mission, was, when they were having the party, when they had just been in this huge life-threatening situation, and the captain remarked on that it was strange. So this is something that's used in all kinds of movies and TV shows and all kinds of fiction. Just having, a character point out when something's a little bit absurd. Sir Boulevard's got a link for us in the chat room to the TV Tropes website, which has all sorts of examples. One of my favorites comes from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when at some point she says, Dawn's in trouble, oh, it must be Tuesday. A character says this in the show, when, of course, Buffy always aired on Tuesdays. So I know sometimes you can use it to break the fourth wall, as they say, pointing out things that go beyond in-universe of the show. Or of the Foundry mission, as we would say.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Can this be used in a way to or lampshade limitations in the Foundry? Because I know
Oh, yeah.
sometimes we have to bend over backwards to get around a Foundry limitation.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely could be. You just have some character, sort of cleverly pointed out that something can't be done, or I wish. Trying to think of some sort of limitation that you could have a character say, "Oh, I wish we could do that, sir," but.
Well, I mean, I know doesn't apply anymore, but back when we couldn't despawn NPCs, with a line about, for some strange reason the transporter's not working or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, a good example is the one that I just took out of the mission after Sabolivar gave me that good advice. Was the backdrop I was using on that interior map was very, very dark. I needed it because of the nice starfield that was outside. And I was like, okay, it's very dark in here. Maybe I should have this engineer officer sitting there by a console trying to get the lights working. And you walk up to them and you can say, why is it so dark on this deck? So, I mean, it could be as simple as that.
Actually, that reminds me, I've done that before too. I had a scene in part 1 where there's a bunch of crates in the corridor. And these crates are actually there because I plan to use a similar map to convey the same corridor later in time. But there were certain specific details, like there was a table that was half buried in the wall and stuff like that were going to be obvious things that didn't match. So I dumped in these large crates to cover them up. And then I stuck this quartermaster standing next to him, asking the question, who in their right mind delivered these crates to the middle of Deck 8? And just kind of, it was just like a little speech bubble that popped up for him. But that was kind of my cover for, I couldn't change the base map, so I covered it up with these very conspicuous crates.
That's a great example there. Usually it's nothing that you have to focus on as a writer. It's usually just sort of an aside that you throw in there. And sometimes it can help your immersion exactly like that, where, obviously it seems like somebody made a huge mistake, or a small one, really. But you point it out, and it seems less ridiculous that way.
Or it brings the ridiculousness into the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I've got something that I think will be a good one for our guests because they play so many Foundry missions. I want to ask you guys and our co-hosts as well, what are some of your pet peeves when you play a Foundry mission? What are some things that people do a lot that you don't really like?
What do you mean besides killing lots of Caitians?
Well, there's that, yeah. Do people
Hopefully
kill
it
a
isn't
lot
one
of
that you come
Caitians?
across often.
Is that common?
No, I was just trying to make a joke.
Honestly,
Sorry.
in most cases, when we experience a lot of Caitians killing, it is usually the fault of a certain Pharazan that is currently in our presence, but we shall discuss that another time.
You, Zira.
My pet
All
peeve.
right. From now on, I'm going to put the disclaimer in all my missions. No Caitians were harmed in the making of this Foundry mission.
I know exactly what mine is. I cannot stand forced combat where it is unnecessary. There are so many Foundry missions where maybe you need to go to a specific objective. It's mostly used in space maps, in my opinion. Like, you have to go to a planet, but before that, it tells you kill these 3 groups of ships that are spread around the planet. I can't take that because it makes absolutely no sense. Why am I going out to hunt down groups of ships instead of just beaming directly to the planet? I hate forced combat, unless it has a purpose, like boss fights.
Ah, yes, forced combat.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of more senior authors who've been around a while that will even go so far as to say there's no good reason for you to use a kill objective.
I wouldn't say no good reason,
Yeah,
but
I don't totally agree with
it's
that,
something
but
that I don't. It's something that I don't tend to use anymore a lot because I like optional combat too. I like combat because ever since I was a kid growing up with Star Trek, I like space battles. That's kind of what brought me to Star Trek in the first place, and I stayed for the rest of it. But I think it's good. It's good gaming to have stuff combat you can skip if you're smart.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I found myself getting into the habit lately of only focusing on the biggest keystone of objectives, and everything else in between that is optional. Now, in a lot of cases, I'll have it set up in such a way that in order to get to the objective, you're really going to have to go through this mob. But the mob itself is not a kill objective. The access console that will proceed that moves along your overarching goals is, but there can be like several steps that you have to do in between those that are not necessarily spelled out as objectives.
Right. See, what I'm doing right now is a really great example of why I hate forced combat. Like, on characters that have the cloak like mine is enabled right now, or ships that have stealth technology, it seems it just makes no sense to have to be forced to fight groups of enemies. If I feel like I want to reach my objective by sneaking past my enemies, then it really bugs me that the game wants me to kill them, that I don't even get the option to sneak past.
That was one of the things that I did in the final Purity mission.
Well, a few
was
missions.
Sorry, what was that, Mark?
I was saying that I have written a few missions where the kill objective is actually what your character is doing at the time. It's not just something that's there. I mean, like in the one mission I did diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant. Your character goes to this planet to talk to some Vorta, but you inadvertently draw the L in the Vorta, and they show up, and the Vorta are like, okay, you're responsible for these losers being here. Get rid of them immediately.
Userol in the chat room brings up a good point, which is when you can try to help people along with stealth gameplay, especially in space with cloaking devices, by recognizing that there's a lot of things that will break stealth combat. So if you're trying to have them sneak past some enemy ships, make sure there's no dialogue in that area that's going to decloak them. Because they might be very annoyed with you if you do that.
Something you can kind of do to get around this is, possibly use reach markers, because you can do that flyby text when they enter a reach marker objective. But that won't
which does not decloak you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that was brought up in the chat room is as a Foundry pet peeve is typos and misspellings. Can distract and detract from the quality of a mission, but I don't know, that can be tough because, I mean, we're all amateurs at this, really, but I don't know. I think it's part of it depends on how you write, whether you write. I think you're going to catch more if you write outside the game. If you write something outside the game, but not everybody does it that way. Not everybody can do it that way. Some people do their best work when they're just writing in the Foundry. So if you do that, I would suggest, make sure you have a couple people before you put it out there for everybody. Have a couple people play it just to edit, and that will catch a lot of things.
With that, I'd like.
Go ahead.
With that, I'd like to say I may or may not be just a little bit guilty in picking just a little bit on Sir Boulevard with his spelling in some of his missions. Just a little bit.
We do get a bit confused at times when it comes to spelling. It's been known to happen, and it breaks it just a little bit. We have a laugh, whatnot, and then we get back into the mission and try to do all the dialogue as best as we can by figuring out. Oh, you know what I mean.
Well, I'll tell you this is watching your guys' show of my mission allowed me to see a lot of mistakes in the grammar and dialogue and everything, some of which you pointed out, some of which I saw just while I was watching, and that was probably the best editing pass on that mission I'd ever had. So if you're lucky enough to have your mission played live, watch it and use it as a great thing for editing.
Yeah, I don't care if you point out my typos, just as long as you tell me where they are.
Same here. I know I have a lot of typos on Eye of the Beholder, and I really need some people to point that out on mine. Please point it out on mine, please.
Oh yeah, Midas' part 1 has been out for 2 years now, and I still get a review every once in a while that says a couple of minor typos. It's like, where?
So you're probably never going to catch them all. That's for sure. They're like Pokemon, right? It's impossible to catch them all. I don't know. I don't.
Hypothetically, it shouldn't be.
I don't have any idea what Pokemon is really. So
I was really weak. I don't know
if that's possible. But one of the funny things that I realized is that, you know, people playing your missions are probably not professional editors or literature professors or, you know, anything like that, and so they may see typos or things they think are misspelled that actually aren't, or things that are grammatically correct that they think are not. So, you know, you always got to be careful with that.
That also goes into the language stuff, and also where people grew up, because a lot of people have a different way of saying the exact same thing. I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know, some people can remove themselves from those influences when they're writing, especially if they're writing characters that grew up in different areas or things like that. But some people just, you know, they interject their own tones and their own phrasing into their characters, for better or for worse, I suppose. Sometimes it can really help a character.
It's relatively common to see what's the word for it? Colloquialism. It's people area won't understand.
That brings me to one of my pet peeves, which is
typographical error, but
you're sort of having trouble coming in here, Mark. It's dropping you out a lot.
Yep.
That's no good.
Yeah. But I was going to say, that kind of brings me into one of my pet peeves, which is people using, I should say aliens, non-humans, using human expressions and idioms and sayings. And I suppose it goes back to the question of what would the universal translator be doing? Would it be translating alien idioms into something that you could understand? And I don't know. But it seems to me like aliens would have their own sayings and things like that. They wouldn't be using ones that humans would say. So I try and be conscious of that when I'm writing alien characters. But I
actually did on one occasion write in for a piece of alien dialogue what is apparently a very poorly translated idiom that makes absolutely no sense to you when you read it.
Yeah, and I think that's great. You know, if you're writing alien characters, make up their own sayings. Things like that.
Like, instead of saying, sorry for this, saying, oh God, say, oh Qatar, or oh great prophets, or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the best things about the episode of Voyager that I talked about earlier, Nemesis, is that the people on that Chakotay was interacting with talked very, very differently. They had their own sayings for things. They had their own slang. It was very interesting to listen to them talk, and it's part of why I want to do a follow-up to that episode is to try and write some of that cool dialogue.
The only other time that I've ever heard something similar to that was that Enterprise Season 1 episode where they go to Nova Prime. It was kind of nice.
Shale!
Yes!
It's Casmodian's favorite saying. We've already had a number of follow-ups to that particular episode.
Oh, no, I wasn't talking about follow-ups. I'm talking about, the fact that they're actually... Yeah, forget it. I'm being quiet.
Aw. Well, anyways, the one that I used, you talk to this... It's basically a sentient rock, I guess you could say. It's like kind of like a mountain that thinks or whatever, but you talk to it through this mechanical translation device that when what it says at least mostly makes sense up until you get to the last thing where the alien is more or less saying goodbye to you, if I remember, I'll try to remember the exact phrasing I use, but if I remember right, it's "Tell Loris good eating," which makes no sense because it's a sentient rock, and it doesn't really, you don't really understand why it would want you to tell that to Loris either.
Now, there are some situations where, your aliens are going to know human expressions, like if they're in Starfleet, presumably they were educated at Starfleet Academy on Earth. They would have been around a lot of humans, so they'd probably know some of these things. But, your Klingons and your Romulans are probably not. Pax Federaticus says, what in the name of Hobus is their equivalent of what the hell?
Well, in my example, the Zelaya have actually never met a human. Because when you go to meet them, you're going there as a representative of the Klingon Empire, and when you meet them, you see that the people that they've been working with in the past are a mixture of Vorta and Jem'Hadar, which aren't humans. And so,
So let's see, any other pet peeves that you guys notice in Foundry missions?
I would say inconsistencies in dialogue text formatting.
Can you elaborate on that?
Basically, where they don't consistently keep with a style guide to how they word buttons or titles or stuff like that in a dialogue window.
So essentially, you want to write consistently as far as how everything looks and what kind of punctuation you use. One thing that I see people inconsistently use is the area where you can put in an NPC's name in the dialogue boxes. Obviously, you can use that for other things than the name, but I've seen people use it for several different things in one mission. And I think if you're going to use it for something, be consistent with it throughout the whole mission. I've seen it used for some very inventive things like telling you the mood or the expression of the NPC.
This kind of reminds me of that robot from Knights of the Old Republic.
HK-47.
Yeah, that would start as every sentence he said with his mood.
Yep.
Or his...
condescending something, and then he would start his dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is I thought it was a great use of that, But if you're going to do things like that, you just got to do it all the time instead of just once in a while or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I have a bit of a pet peeve if you're done with that one.
Go for it.
I'm sorry to say this. You and bridge officers getting stuck in certain portions of the map. Example, Sir Boulevard's Honor of the Empire. I ended up getting stuck in this tiny little turbo lift, and I could not progress. We thought we couldn't even progress through the through the rest of the mission unless we both beamed up and then beamed back down, went through all the map changes. It was a nightmare. Luckily, though, because of the great Foundry programming stuff, we were able to finish the mission. But I was still stuck in the turbo lift.
Yeah, that turbo lift is not big enough to spawn in. And a lot of authors don't realize that.
Yeah. If you're going to use one of those turbo lift assets, I would say, you want to spawn right in front of it instead of inside it. Especially because if you're teaming, could put somebody in a wall.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think authors realize that the spawn area is potentially larger than that blue circle that it shows.
Yeah. I remember one of the times we did a live stream of a Foundry mission that we were playing, and my character got stuck in a wall while you guys went off and explored this indoor botanical garden or something.
Now the other problem with this, on the other side is it can be very inconsistent. You may not spawn the same way the next time, and obviously you guys were able to complete it eventually. You might have just had bad luck on that first time, and then the second time it went through. I know, Moses, when I was beta testing your Part 2, Dragoon, I was having difficulty going through doors with my bridge officers. I was having to manually make them go through the door. But when you played it, it worked fine.
It was doing that for me too for a while, and then after when we published it, suddenly fixed itself. It was around the same time we were having all those problems with the Foundry editor being very slow, and so I can't help but wonder if that wasn't affecting things at all.
Possibly.
Yeah,
I think I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
If you're done with yours, that is. This one is related to fully custom maps. And my little pet peeve with that one is custom maps with hallways and doorways that have been designed to be so small that your bridge officers will get stuck in nearly everything, or even sometimes teleport through the roof or something like that if there is simply not enough room.
So
that is a really big downer.
There's something specific that causes this, and this is caused when the author spawns or despawns an entire section, especially the floor, because what happens is when a map is published, it calculates out all of the pathing, and it ignores any object that has a trigger on it. So if the floor has
more specifically, I think it ignores any object that is not set to spawn at the start of the map.
No, so it'll ignore whether it's set to spawn or despawn. If it has a trigger on it, it will not be kept because it doesn't know for sure that object is always there. So it pretends that it's not. This runs into problems with things like the floor because if the pathing doesn't think the floor exists, things like boss popping through are going to happen. They're going to get stuck on things. Now, if it's just like one section of wall or something like that, it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, for doorways, if you've ever had doorways, weird Foundry bugs aside, where they get stuck and that you have a trigger on, that's a pretty telltale sign because the boss can't see the door, literally.
We once did a mission where after activating a trigger, it basically changed the entire landscape to be from the outside of a station to the inside of the station, and our bridge officers just went crazy.
Yeah, because they can't see anything. Yeah. Or at least their pathing can't see anything. To them, it says there's nothing here. So that's what's happening there. And then they and some time ago they changed the Foundry code, so to kind of prevent boss from getting stuck, so that they have the right to pop through geometry if they are really sure they should be able to. And so that causes them to do things like pop through floors and stuff. So yeah, I know there are some people out there, or authors out there that like to do the entire despawn of an entire map they've built, and unfortunately, it just causes a world of problems for the pathing.
So the advice to authors I would have is, if you're going to do a map that has just a whole crapload of despawning or spawning architecture, especially floors, make sure it's not a map where it's going to hurt if they don't have their bridge officers with them.
Yeah.
It's not a map that you're going to run into a lot of combat with, for example.
Yeah. I had a very recent example of that with, well, I don't remember what mission it was, but the current objective at that time was to go and defeat a Romulan commander and his guards on a custom map. This commander, he was a captain level mob, so he would of course be one of those that you shouldn't be able to take down on your own. The big problem I had with that one was that when I actually got to the boss, he and his guards and my buffs would somehow end underneath the floor, and I couldn't see them anything. I could just hear them fight, and I had to go and wait for either my buffs to die or the enemies to die.
I had one where, it wasn't a floor issue, but it was, they spawned a force field after you interact with something, but it was very easy for that to cut off one or two of your bridge officers, and they couldn't rejoin you because there was no way to drop the force field after that. But in this case, it was no big deal because there was no combat on that map, so it didn't really matter if they were with me or not. But it can break immersion if you do that. So if you're going to spawn something that cuts off part of the map, make sure the player is sufficiently away from it that their bridge officers don't get trapped. I think I might have had a similar problem to that in one of your missions, Greendragoon, at some point.
One of my missions? I only have one.
Yeah, but I've played more than one of yours.
That's true.
I can't remember when it was. It might have been the very first time I ever tested Part 2. There was something where a bridge officer got trapped in a way far away part of the map.
Remember where we got trapped on in?
I don't remember at all.
Oh.
But, it's good advice for authors to playtest a lot and playtest in a group to try and catch these issues, and maybe there's things you can do about them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you remember that playtest I had you and Hippie do with me way back when.
Mm-hmm.
That actually opened up so many problems with grouping that I had never considered. So I actually added in a bunch of fail-safes to kind of deal with some of the problems I found from just that one playtest.
You guys were talking about Sir Boulevard's mission earlier, and he's in the chat room here, and was saying that it's intended for a single player, but as Dragoon points out, playing as a team can point out a lot of issues that also could affect the single player.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to do, or to watch somebody do.
Yeah, because issues that will have a player get stuck inside a wall, in single player, instead of having one of your teammates get stuck in the wall, it'll be one of your bridge officers. I mean, so it's linked to the same thing.
And it's also useful to have somebody else, and to watch somebody else play your mission, to be in the team with them, is to watch how they interact with the environment and see if they're going to the right places, see if they're getting anywhere that they shouldn't be getting that could break the mission, like falling out a window that they can't get back up again, things like that. So I just,
as the writer, you know what is supposed to be done, and a lot of the time you will subconsciously just go through the motions of everything because of the fact that you know what it's supposed to look like. However, having someone who doesn't have that knowledge go through things will often reveal little things that you just didn't think of. Like, I don't remember if it was Sir Boulevard or who it was, but I did this group play of a Foundry mission to test it, and the first goal in it is to go from point A to point B. His intended method was to walk through this small ravine where there were several enemy mobs you had to deal with along the way, and then get to this small village. Well, I went in a straight line from point A to point B. I literally climbed the wall of the ravine and jumped off the other side into the village directly. It didn't break the mission, but it's something that he just simply never thought of.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit, I want to ask a question. It's a question that we've asked before on the show, but I think we get a good perspective from our guests on it, since they play a lot of Foundry missions. What for you makes a mission worthy of 5 stars? The highest rating you can give it.
Story. A mission has to have a very, very good story, in my opinion. Something breathtaking, like, well, for example, when we played through that featured series, I have forgotten the name of now, that got spotlighted, all those 6 missions. There were a lot of moments in the story of that one that were shocking and breathtaking and completely unexpected, and that is the kind of things that makes a mission really good for me.
Yeah, it was the same thing with, as I said, Ash's, what's his series? It was a great story, and it always got me up into an uproar because of how some of the characters reacting, like Admiral Falter, or however you pronounce her name.
Close enough.
How do you pronounce it, actually?
Fautor or something like that.
Fautor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't blame me. I did not come up with it. One of the nice things about Foundry mission creation is that usually the names don't have to be spoken aloud. Usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't come up with that character name, so.
It's usually best to not write names like Mixelflick, though. In case people aren't familiar, the spelling of that name is one of the most bizarre character names ever to come up in a comic book, and Superman Comics has had a lot of weird character names.
Scott A. Price in the chat room says 5-star equals creative story that intertwines Star Trek themes along with elements from the game.
That's a good way of describing it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that we all agree on what Star Trek themes means, though. as we discussed in a previous show.
Well, the game's theme right now is definitely shoot first, shoot later, shoot some more, and then when everybody's dead, try to ask a question. Well, at least that's how it was in the beginning.
Talk you
poor. Well, you know,
I
the
think
TV show has gone there anytime.
I'll say I think people will be pleasantly surprised with some of the stuff in the expansion. And if you don't believe me, go on Tribble and try it.
So, for me personally, I tend to split any of my reviews into 3 sections: story, gameplay, and visuals. So, my personal opinion on what makes a really great 5-star mission is a mission that manages to get all of those 3 pillars working together well, effectively.
sort of when the mission is, the sum of all those parts. So if all those parts are working together and meshing well, that's when you got some magic going on.
Yeah, because that's when you get the most immersive experience.
I don't know. I tend to find a good indicator of when something is worthy of a 5-star mission is when I'm not looking at the clock all the time. I'm lost in the mission. It's that good. It's that immersive. It's capturing my attention that much. And I think the one in recent memory that did that for me was Shore Leave Under Siege by Johnny Snowball. I mean, I wasn't even looking at the clock to see how long I'd been in that mission. And sometimes I do that if it's not capturing my attention, I'm going to be conscious of how long I've been playing. But if it is, I won't even lose track of time. So that's an indicator. It's not necessarily the only one. Well, let's see. Anybody got any other discussion topics? Anything they want to bring up?
Shameless self-promotion?
Shameless self-promotion?
Watch our show on YouTube, send Foundry playthroughs. Shameless self-promotion off.
Yeah, well,
I would like to see a little something. I'd like to see a few more synergy. Sorry. I'd like to see a few more Foundry missions that are just purely parodies. Nice, funny parodies. I don't get to play funny stuff as much anymore.
Have you played anything by Zorbane?
Have we, SoftGun?
I do not remember.
You should give his a try. Yeah.
I think we have played some of his before.
He's got ones that are parodies of comic books. One in particular is Duratanium Man, which is a play on Iron
one
Man.
I've played.
you also did a mission that it's a fourth wall breaking mission that kind of makes fun of the respawn mechanic in Star Trek Online and what could theoretically happen when you're being respawned.
Yeah,
Well, let's talk about parodies a little bit. What makes a good parody, and what makes a bad one?
As far as bad ones, I would say, or sometimes people will try to do parody when really they're trying to do or insult something, or flame something. And I think that right there is if you're trying to parody something because you're angry about it, that's like a non-starter, and it's probably not going to be very good, if it's even tolerable. But I would say good parodies are things that respect the source that they're coming from, but at the same time are free enough to kind of take their own spin and really do their own thing with it in a way that the original source never could.
One other thing that I noticed is when you're actually doing the parody, make sure you know a lot about what you are parodying before actually doing it. Does that make any sense?
To me, it does.
Yeah, you don't want to get the little things wrong.
Right.
Yeah, because if you are attempting to imitate something and to do a poor imitation, that will often ruin the tone of what you're attempting to present.
One of the things I like to hold up as like one of the all-time great parodies is Galaxy Quest. And what I think they did that just resonated so well was that obviously they changed all of the individual details to not be Star Trek, but at the same time, it very much keeps the spirit of what the show had in a way that is both humorous, but at the same time also you can tell it's almost a love letter as much as it is a making fun of it.
In good parodies, they have a reverence for the source material rather than contempt of it.
I suppose
Is
another
what I
way
would
to
say.
put it would be they don't. Crap. They make it so that it comes across as though they like the source material. And that's the best way I can think of to put it, because that's one thing about Galaxy Quest is that, they did all these weird things, like the ship was designed so that the guy who's running their transporter beam had to do these elaborate hand movements that had no actual practical purpose to make the controls work. Which, if you remember from the TV show, they did some kind of odd things with the way that the transporters work, because in the Next Generation, you see when the people are doing the transporter, they'll touch their fingers to this pad and slide these 4 little like digital buttons down the pad simultaneously. Why that's done was never explained in the show. I mean, they did demonstrate that if you were to stop sliding your fingers down and slide them back up, the transport would abruptly stop and the person would, reappear back where they were being transported from. But aside from that, this particular thing was never shown to have a function. And then, of course, there's the fact is, why are there 4 of them that don't move together? Why do you need 4 fingers to make all 4 of the sliders move? I mean, that was just the sort of thing that they were parodying when they did that particular aspect of it, but they weren't mean about it. They're like, oh, well, this is kind of fun.
They picked up on those funny little things that happened during the production of the original series, not just the series itself.
The quirks of the show.
Mm-hmm. I think the other major part of a parody is it does have to be funny. You're going nowhere if it's not funny.
Yeah.
and that can be a tough needle to thread. And I don't necessarily have good advice on that, because all of the jokes in my missions are stolen from Monty Python. Nobody expects the Ferengi Commerce Authority.
Oh god, I remember that one, I think.
Comedy is 90% timing.
Yes, it is.
If you will allow me to make a recommendation real quick, if anybody wants to see a really amazing example of a parody mission in Star Trek, look up a mission called now of course I forgot it. Do you remember, Ghost? It's that mission that we played for Stouts. Collectiveness Strikes Gold. That one, I can guarantee you won't make it through without feeling like you are about to die of laughter.
I can't really remember the mission. I am terribly sorry. I've been out in the
I know I've played that one too, but I can't remember it very well either.
It's mostly because...
Parodies.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking that I don't remember Collectiveness Strikes Gold as being a parody. It really came across more as being straightforward to me, but I don't know. Maybe I missed it.
Maybe he's changed it.
It did have quite a lot of parodies. Like, there's this one parody that I actually posted in the chat in hopes of Ghost would see it, where he's got this one Andorian captain who often mentions Andorian Express. That is supposed to be a parody of either a MasterCard or American Express. It's supposed to be a parody of American Express.
No, that's actually stolen from Primetime UGC. They have a bunch of parody commercials on there. One of them being Andorian Express.
I'll be damned. Learn something new every day.
That's a good resource for parodies, is seeing some of what Captain P.F. Dennis came up with for that, especially like Law and Horta.
Say what?
Law and Horta instead of playing off the TV show Law and Order.
She made most of an episode out of that.
Yeah. And of course, anything that Crazy Chulaski does is always good. So Primetime UGC is a brilliant... Captain PFNS just has a brilliant flair for that. And a great singing voice. So, you know what? While we're on the subject of things that you'd like to see, are there any other kinds of missions that you don't see enough of, you think?
Well, I've gotten all my stuff answered because, me being, me, I don't even want to go into a lot of detail, but I've seen a lot of missions that appeal to my tastes. I'm not sure about Shotgun, however.
I'm trying to... I got it in my mind, but I can't make it come out of my mouth. Is how I would describe the type of mission. I actually don't know, so I'm just going to use a mission that I still have in my active list as an example. It's called Shore Leave Under Siege, and basically the premises of it is that you're on vacation with your bridge officers. You visit a nice town, you get to chat with some locals, you go to an exhibition, and suddenly stuff goes to hell with aliens and stuff like that. It's missions like that where most missions will start out with, you have a mission, you must go here, you must transport something, or you must escort something. There are way too few missions where they're like, go take a vacation, go visit this nice place, you visit around, you explore around a bit, and suddenly something happens. I don't see enough of that.
I mentioned that one earlier, as it's one of the few that I've given a 5-star to. It is one of my absolute favorite missions of all time. So, yeah, no, I think that's great. And
I think that what I would like to see people do more often in the way of missions is play with the Alien of the Week format more. I mean, because I know a lot of people have specific reasons for not doing the Alien of the Week thing, and then some people who go off the deep end with the Alien of the Week thing and do it more like the Evil Empire of the Week. But because I guess the best way to put it is taking the Alien of the Week episodes and revisiting the Alien of the Week later. I mean, because in one of my missions called the Beta Rana incident, we have this group of Bosliks who are doing a contract for the Tholian. The exact specifics of this are not mentioned, but it's the simple fact that it's Bosliks on the edge of Federation space doing something. I mean, they're a race we saw in Deep Space Nine several times, and maybe once or twice in other places, but it's not a race that's been seen a lot, and I don't think that Cryptics ever used them in one of their missions. Because there are literally hundreds of races that appeared in 1 or 2 episodes of Star Trek, and only 1 or 2 episodes of Star Trek. And it's something that makes for interesting stories. I mean, because a lot of these races had, specific reasons for why they were seen in those situations. And, well, like, for example, the Acamarians. Cryptic doesn't go into much detail on their current status, but, they touch on the nature of the episode that the Acamarians were seen in The Next Generation. In my opinion, it was one of the best, but,
Well, I think we got the perfect opportunity to do some of that with the Delta Quadrant species, since we'll be going there.
Oh, and I hope we get all of those fun new costume and race options for the Foundry editor. The Helaxian costumes in particular look like they would be interesting to use for civilian NPCs.
Mm-hmm. That's one of my biggest questions right now about Delta Rising is what, if anything, are we going to get for the character creator? And at the moment, we only know about one costume. But I suppose
Hopefully
that will be
but,
revealed in time.
Everything is always what we would like.
Oh, yeah. everything is always what we like.
Well, I mean, even Gecko was talking about Foundry editions with Delta Rising.
Yeah, he said assets, and I'm
Costumes
assuming
or
ships and combat mobs is what I'm expecting. Maybe we'll get some other stuff later. We shall hope. Well, why don't we end it there for the night? Dragoon, put up our info.
All right. One of these days, I'll remember to take Tippy John off there.
I'm sure he doesn't mind for the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't. We can be emailed at foundryroundtable@live.com. We can also be found on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab, no LE, because Twitter does not like long names. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Markhawkman can be reached at MAR and he needs to check out more. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we will be back next week when I assume we will have even more Delta Rising news to talk about. Because it's coming thick and fast now. But for the moment, we will say good night, or for our overseas guest, good morning.
And may the lion's pride be with you.
Thank you for allowing us to join you.
Yes.
It was nice having
Very
you.
welcome.
And for me, it is actually good night because it's 3 in the middle of the night and I have to go to sleep now.
All right,
Good night, Softgun.
Thank you for staying up with us.
No problem.